Coffee is a big part of my day. Not only does it help me get through the morning, but I just really love the taste of good quality beans. Trade is a subscription service that brings great coffee from indie roasters all over the country right to your door. Tell Trade what you typically like, whether it's espresso or single origins or even decaf, even how you like to make your coffee, and they will recommend the right beans for you. Or you can just choose from over 450 different coffees. Then you select how often you'd like the coffee delivered to you. Shipping is always free, by the way. And if you need to skip a week or so, just do that. You can do it. No charge at all. Then pick back up when you're ready to get beans delivered to your door again. Go to unitedwedrink.com/trade to get started with Trade today and start getting some of the best coffees in the country delivered to your door. That's unitedwedrink.com/trade. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, co-workers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the United... Blah, 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 blah.
Keep all that in. Keep all that in. Just keep going.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the United We Drink podcast right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich, and we're getting towards the end of baseball season, and it's getting fucking frustrating. And with me, as always, is a guy whose baseball season was over like 3 months ago, Kevin Abbott.
All the same to me, Mike. All the same to me. Tiger's been sitting a solid 10 games below 500 for about 3 months. So we're playing for 2024. I'm hoping Torkelson gets 2 more home runs. He hit one today, so he can have a 30 home run season. Hoping Riley Green gets healthy, and we can find at least one other bat.
Yeah, I'm wishing that we could find some bullpen help. But this isn't the United We Talk About Baseball podcast, except for when we do talk about baseball. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing well, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I mean,
this is the United We Ask About How We're Doing podcast.
It's we got a little reprieval from humidity for like a week, but now it's back with the high temperatures, and I'm miserable again when I step out the door of any place. So there's that.
But I want to hear from our listeners, because I think I might have said this on the show. Obviously, everything's Groundhog Day. I never know what I've said and what I haven't, or what I've just thought or had conversations with real people in the real world. But I feel like every conversation I've had with a human being in the past year has at least once mentioned how hot it is in South Florida. It's required that you start a conversation going, "Oh, it's freaking hot," and then you are allowed to talk about other things. Now, I know that Florida is one of the, obviously, Arizona and Nevada get hotter, but I'm wondering about people that are in other areas of the country. I know my dad complains about how hot it is in Michigan right now. Is that just a deal? Is everyone just miserably hot, or is it just a few states?
No, I think a lot of places are. Like, I mean, I remember when we first moved here in '97, my folks used to always talk about how it was more humid in Philly than it was down here. And the heat wasn't so bad down here because you would get like a shower in the afternoon or a sea breeze coming off the ocean in the afternoon. But that's all fucking changed because of climate change. And now the north cities are hot. still. It's even hotter here and more humid here. That's the thing. Like I think the humidity here is what the killer out of it all. Um, like and that we have this for so long. Like this all pretty much started in April, May, and will be going until somewhere in November. So it's like more than half the year, if numbers work.
I mean,
Like
I've listened. One of my favorite podcasts is A Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, and they did a really good breakdown of like wet bulb temperature. And we basically live in a place that is unsurvivable,
yeah,
unless
they've
you.
never had a season of Survivor here. Like it's unsurvivorable.
Is that if you can't get into the shade, you can't get into air conditioning, you can't get into home. If you are out for long periods of time, like it is not a survivable uh, temperature. I just think that's hilarious. I mean, I love my air conditioning. I did not realize it was saving my life.
I knew that it was saving my life for at least the last 5 years. Um, anyway, Kevin, what are you drinking on this fine evening in the air conditioning?
I am drinking a Irish whiskey called Sláinte. I have been drinking a lot of Irish whiskey since coming back from Dublin. I've always loved Irish whiskey. It was never my go-to, but I always like to try new ones. But after I've drank the Kool-Aid and the whiskey apparently, because I do. After
They
talking to
have
some
gimmicks
people,
over there too. They put Kool-Aid in their whiskey. Fucking pastry whiskeys.
that's exactly what's happening. You can't stop it. Tang too. It's more tang over there. Kool-Aid's over on this side of the pond, as they say. But talking about Irish whiskey and learning a little bit more about it, I'm appreciating it more and more, and really enjoying it, and kind of becoming more my. This is becoming more of my go-to than bourbon or Scotch.
While I would not say that I enjoy Irish whiskey more than bourbon, I have Irish whiskey with me tonight too. I have Powers Irish whiskey.
I like Powers.
Yeah, it's a pretty well priced one. A former coworker at a brewery that I used to work for told me about it, and I feel like the only place that I can find it is Total Wine, and we were just in there this past weekend. I'm like, haven't had a bottle of this in a while, so I grabbed one, and I really enjoy it. I also have a can of Daisy Cutter
Oh
from
wow!
Half Acre that is available down here. My wife got it at Whole Foods.
Yeah,
Um,
haven't seen that one in a long time.
it's kind of funny that this was like my go-to beer when I lived in Philly, a Chicago beer, because I could get cans really easily, and my favorite bar in the entire world always had this on tap for. At the time, it was $4.75 for a pint. It's now up to a ridiculous $5.25.
Thank you for that update. I think that's important. It's like watching the stock market. Mike is watching the price of a Daisy Cutter. This is at Whole Foods. They have it.
Yeah, she found it at the Whole Foods in West Palm.
Well, I'm at to swing by the one in Boca. That's got Old Favorite Friday written all over it.
Yeah, that really does. Speaking of Old Favorite Friday, segue, inadvertent too. Kevin wanted to talk about some like old favorite beers of ours, like kind of a trot down memory lane, and talk about the beers that we were having when we were first getting into craft down here. And he sent me over a list, and a lot of this stuff is like very memorable to me, and from breweries that we are huge in the whole scheme of things with craft beer, but like we probably don't give them the props that they deserve, like your Avery's in Brooklyn and Bell's Great Divide. It's pretty extensive. because I remember probably just like Kevin going into the Total Wine, going to the beer section, grabbing like maybe one of those mixed 6-pack things and just picking out stuff and finding beers that were incredible and became somewhat regular things that you would go back to.
The thing I found the most interesting is this was spurned on by doing my Old Favorite Friday videos, because there were so many beers that came up in my mind, and I said, Lagunitas Maximus, right? I ended up finding that one, but then it went me down the rabbit hole of all the Lagunitas beers that I had over the years. And then I would go and find out that either A, they were retired beers, they're no longer made, which is nobody can get them, or B, they just are still available, but not available in our state. And I'll get suggestions all the time from people that say, oh, you should drink this beer, you should feature this beer. I wish I could. It's not available in Florida anymore. And I was going through this in my mind and going, man, there's some big brands that either distribute very little down here or not at all that used to own this space. And I know that this is a little bit hyper local to us in Florida, but we can all think about breweries that had kind of been super popular in your area, or they were all over the place. They were all over draft lines. And then all of a sudden, they're in the background. They've got 1 or 2 SKUs on only the largest shelves at the biggest box stores. And they used to own it. And now they're almost an afterthought in your market. And, I'll kick this off talking about Avery, because they still have beers like Maharaja, White Rascal, Ellie's Brown Ale, Kaiser. That's still in their portfolio. Every one of those beers I love, every one of those beers I would do for Old Favorite Friday, not a single one of them is distributed in South Florida. And I'm just wondering, is that normal? I mean, have they pulled back their distribution so much that they used to be in 40 states and now they're in 20? I don't know the answer to that. But I'm thinking of Salvation, which was one of my first Belgian beers, which I absolutely loved, and then the Fallen Angel series with Mephistopheles and Samels, which were mostly nostalgic for me. I enjoyed them, but because those were the highest gravity beers that Chung could give us from Coffee District to convince us to stay out for an extra hour or so at 2:00 in the morning. And that's nostalgic for a different reason. But, Avery is such a massive brand. And the fact that they used to be everywhere, and listen, I'm sure they're doing extremely well. They're a much bigger brewery than mine, but it seems like they're an afterthought now, and at least in this market.
Yeah, I don't know if they are available here anymore. I'm pulling up their website right as I'm on their site, and I go to the beer finder page, and it says, "Oh dang, sorry, but our beer finder is busted right now." This one, there's a lot on this list you sent me that hits home, but I think that this was probably one of the bigger ones, because Maharaja, for the longest period of time, was like the epitome of a double IPA to me. It was my favorite. Like, the first time I had that beer, I can remember just being punched in the mouth with grapefruit flavor, and I love grapefruit, and I was like, this is my new favorite beer. And I bought bomber bottles of that so many times. So many times. But apparently I got to a point where I did not buy it so many times, to where they saw no reason to be in Florida anymore. They're like, that Mike guy who loves beer is no longer loving our beer. And it was all my fault.
It's all your fault, Mike. No, it's my fault too, because I love that beer as well. In fact, we are doing the 2024 calendar for Barrel of Monks right now, and spurned on by the memory of Maharaja, which I admittedly have not had, and it has to be 5 years, if not more. I have no idea when the beer actually left the market, but in a very long time. I was drinking Lagunitas Maximus, which is a big multi-double IPA, how I remember Maharaja. We are going to do a big multi-double IPA in the spirit of those beers, because we haven't had very many opportunities to drink those beers in a long time. And I think that was a brewery that was really a big gateway brewery for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people.
Yeah, it had to have been. Um, I'm looking at this list, man. This is just crazy. Uh, what all is on here? Like you said, Ellie's Brown. I mean, that
Great brown ale.
such a good one. Um, oh crap! What happened?
I mean, even White Rascal was a white ale unlike other white ales. It was not a traditional white ale. It wasn't American wheat. It was its own thing. And this is a lot of it. We talk about all the time when we're trying beers that are seasonal for us, and we try to think of how what did we think about it last year? How would we remember? It's a year ago. Getting tasting notes and memories of those things are fallible. And now I'm talking about beers that I loved 5, 10 years ago, and I'm supposed to remember everything about them. I know I can't, but my
This is White
experiences with tasting those, I loved them.
White Rascal won a silver in the World Beer Cup in 2018 in the wit beer category.
Still an amazing beer.
Yeah, like that's 3 years ago. No, that's 5 years ago. But I mean, that's still rather recent in the whole scheme of things. And that's the World Beer Cup. That's going against Belgian beers.
Yeah.
And it took a silver in that. Right here, I see they have something called Little Rascal now. That is a session Belgian wit beer, as if wit beers aren't sessionable.
Well, I'm pretty sure White Rascal is up around 7%, if I'm correct.
No, 5-6.
Oh, I'm not correct. Thank you for being there to correct me. I was under the impression that was a little bit higher, but so their session is what, like a 4%?
4.5. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting. I don't know why, but I always felt, I know they're not connected anyway, but Great Divide and Avery always seem to sit next to each other on the shelf for me. And maybe it's because both those brands had multiple SKUs and a lot of different styles.
Yeah.
And Great Divide was another one that it blew my mind looking at their portfolio of the beers that they used to have. And I can't find a single Great Divide beer in Florida right now. And even, looking at obviously Yeti, which was a monster for me and a beer that I absolutely loved, but looking at Hercules, looking at Haas, looking at Claymore, their Scotch ale, which I remember loving. Now, Claymore, of the ones I've just mentioned, I think is the only one that's actually retired, but that's another brewery that I feel like their regular IPA Titan, I remember loving. Pretty much every beer they had, I remember really, really enjoying, and it's a brand that's disappeared completely from our market.
Yeah, they looking at their site. Yeah, I do remember these ones being stuff. Titan and Hercules, like in that phase of being super into the hoppy beers. I love those ones so much. I'm trying to see if they have like the beer finder type page, but oh yeah, Haas. Yeah, their Oktoberfest was so good as well.
And going through, I found a lot of these beers through like the Beer Advocate site for the retired beers, looking through a lot of these breweries because I wanted to see whether or not these were beers I just couldn't get anymore because of where I live, or they were beers that were actually retired. And I realized that it's not perfect. I'm sure there's several beers that were on there that aren't retired and vice versa that are retired that aren't on there. But thankfully, several of the sites that I visited, and another one I'll throw out there with you is Left Hand. Left Hand has a great list of retired beers on their website. And just going down, I could not list in this email that I sent you all the ones that I love with Chainsaw and Double Chainsaw. And I mean, there was a million of them. The one that I think I've mentioned on this podcast 50 times is Smoke Jumper. That is completely gone. And I always equate that with the Stone, their smoked porter, which is completely gone to the best of my knowledge of beer gun. And now Left Hand, I believe, and listen, I understand I don't go to that many stores, and also Florida distribution is not one thing. In Tampa, you may be able to find things that we can't find down here. But Left Hand Milk Stout, I think, is the only beer that is distributed down here that I can find. It's a great beer. I love Left Hand Milk Stout, but that was another brand that was everywhere. If you walked into a craft beer bar, you saw Left Hand beers and possibly multiple of them. And I don't know if I've seen a Left Hand beer in distribution on draft in Florida in, it feels like 10 years.
Yeah, I definitely can't think of anything other than Milk Stout that I've seen on tap. You weren't kidding about the detailed list of stuff that they used to have on their website. I'm looking at Wake Up Dead, their Imperial Stout. I loved that beer too. Man, there's so much good stuff that Smoke Jumper. I did not agree with you when you said that because I was going through this list, but holy fuck yeah, that beer was so good. And it's funny, all these past three are all Colorado, like kind of staples of the craft beer industry. I've been to all of them. I haven't been to Avery's new big facility that they have. I was at their original facility, but I mean, been to Great Divide, talked about that being the beginning phases of the highest night of my life there. Been to Left Hand, went to like a brunch during GABF the first time I ever went to Colorado out there. Why not we just talk about Oscar Blues then too? You have them on this list 'cause they're right down the street practically from Left Hand.
Yeah, I mean, Oscar Blues, and looking through these, and once again, everyone's going to have a different experience with this because so many of you that are listening to this listen outside of our state and maybe going, I got that beer all the time. It's still extremely popular. I can find it everywhere. But I want you to think about all the beers that were in your neck of the woods that were super popular or well distributed that might not be there anymore that maybe we get consistently down here in South Florida. But Old Chub was a beer near and dear to my heart, as well as Gubna, which was one of the most unique IPAs I ever had in my life. I always said it tasted like onion, and that wasn't a bad thing. To a lot of people it was, but it was something that I really, really enjoyed. 1050, I did not put it on the list because I did not know what the actual distribution of that was. I feel like I have seen it in Florida in the last year or so, maybe just seasonally, but definitely, I mean, Dale's is there. Mama's, Little Yellow Pills, I see that on a regular basis.
Yeah, I've had that recently.
Yeah, those are there. But I remember going to see the shelf for Oscar Blues and seeing Dale's, Deviant Dale's, Gubna, and that. But I remember seeing a whole shelf, and now I see one or two SKUs, and that's for a brand that killed it in the market. And I'm sure, friend of the show, Phil Parmigiano, can chime in and tell us exactly where to get all of these things.
I wasn't a big fan of Gubna myself, but I did. One of the best times I ever had having Gubna was having a can right off of the line because of silly reasons that I've ever had. But I loved a double IPA that they did called Deviant Dales. It didn't stick around for very long, but it was so good to me. Old Chub, it looks like they still make Old Chub, but I don't know. It's not down here, at least in any of the places that I've looked at. Like even the Total Wine nearest to me only has Dale's, Mama's, and a mix pack. But the barrel aged 1050, one of the best barrel aged beers in the world. Like,
Have I ever told the 1050 story how I used to punish people at the Funky Buddha Lounge when I was a bartender on the show?
I feel like you've told me that before, but not on the show.
So I worked, the original Funky Buddha was the Lounge, which was essentially a hookah bar that just so happened to have beer and make beer, and no one really cared because it was all college kids with no money and they wanted to smoke hookah and listen to a bad jam band and didn't care about the beer at all, even though we made our own beer and also had an incredible beer list. So people would come up all the time and go, "Give me a beer," which, well, we have 100 beers in bottles and cans, and we've got 20 beers on draft. What beer do you want? So inevitably, someone would say, and this is probably once a week, whatever's your favorite, because they didn't know beer was anything more than Budweiser. They thought I was just going to give them something that tasted like a Budweiser, and they didn't want to have to choose because they were entitled college kids. So I would always pick 1050, and I would bring it to them, and it wasn't cheap. So first of all, they had to pay a pretty penny for it, and I would pour that motor oil into a glass and watch them try to drink it, and their face contort into all these different kinds of shapes that never happened before, and have them be miserable and looking at me like, "What did you give me? I'm not paying for that." And I go, "You told me to give you what I like to drink. You told me to pick. That's your drink. Now you suffer through that." Probably why I was not a great bartender, because when I want to have the people suffer, that's not the point. But I enjoyed it. So 1050 is not only a great beer for me because it's a great beer to enjoy, but it's also a great beer for punishment of morons.
It's also the last beer that I have ever shotgunned in my life. At the final night of a bachelor party weekend for a friend in the Keys. It was all planned that we were going to shotgun 1050. I believe Phil supplied the 1050s, and it was rough, even for someone who likes that beer. I'm not a chugger. I don't like chugging beer. It's difficult for me to do, and to then add in the whole theatrics of shotgunning and then that beer. Yeah, it wasn't fun.
You had everything working against you. You should make that. Don't ever shotgun another beer. You should keep that as your story because that's the one you want to have as your last one. That's your swan song. For
if I ever shotgun a beer ever again and you see it, Kevin, shotgun me with a shotgun, please.
I was going to say knock it out of your hand, but if you want me to kill you, Mike, I will. I'll put you out of your misery. Mike, there was a couple, and by the way, I hope you can jump in with any other beers that you were thinking about that, kind of spark your mind from this. 2 breweries really stuck out from me when I was looking through this list, and this is a list that I was randomly compiled. It's not comprehensive at all, but 2 breweries stuck out of the amount of beers I love from them and did not realize how much I love them, and most of them are totally gone. One is North Coast, and we still get Old Rasputin down here. We still get barrel-aged Old Rasputin.
For we still get Scrimshaw. I've had that recently.
Scrimshaw's great.
Yeah.
But Old Rasputin, for my money, in the barrel age, 2 of the best stouts in the world, bar none, period.
Yeah.
We'll take them over pretty much every pastry stout. I don't care what you have to say. Better beer, objectively. But Red Seal, the old number 38 stout, 2 incredible beers that I absolutely loved that are completely gone from our market. And then Old Stock. I loved Old Stock. And the barrel-aged Old Stock was, I remember having barrel-aged Old Stock at they weren't even called this at that time, but a Wales tasting. Where we had all these super rare beers, and listen, we were all douchebags back then, but we were having these tastings, and people were bringing beers in from all over the country. And I remember having barrel-aged Old Stock there and saying, "This is the best beer out of all of these," and it was probably the lowest rated beer out of all of them, but that was a better beer, bar none. I think all the beers I just mentioned are still in production, but not a single one of them comes down to South Florida, and that is a brewery that makes great beer. I always knew they did. But I guess I was shocked at the amount of beers that I was like, man, what a great brewery. Everything they do is so good.
Yeah, they did those the Acme beers too. It was like a red lager. They weren't they brewed them, but they had like a different branding to them.
Hmm.
But I don't think I've ever had that stout before, strangely enough.
Oh, the number 38 stout.
Yeah, I
Really
don't
good.
think I've ever had that. But
It's got
I
a
mean,
it's got a like
I
a
know which one you're
train.
talking
No,
about,
okay, got you. Just want to make
but
sure.
I don't think I've ever had it. But I mean, Old Stock, holy fuck. That beer fresh, so good. That beer with a few years on it, otherworldly. Like I remember I had a bottle of Old Stock that I was waiting for 10 years on. I think I made it to like 8 before I just finally drank it. But the barrel aged one, I mean, so many of these beers, like we can look at this list and find beers that were considered whales and difficult to get a hold of at the time. Like even like 120 minute was like really hard to get. The stores only got so much of it, and you were lucky if you got one bottle. And then like as things became more hyper local, those beers, I guess, fell a little out of favor and became easier to find in shops. And then slowly were just discontinued by distributors or suppliers, whatever. Like that's the thing too, is looking at so many of these brands, they just saturated the market with everything that they had, every single thing. And now, like, at least for people who are in the industry, they probably will agree with us now. Like, your distributors are like, nah, no new SKUs. What? Like, they don't want new stuff from you unless you have like guaranteed placements on it, and like they'll only carry this, but not that, and maybe not even that size. Like, oh, I got half barrels and slims. Now we don't want the half barrels. We just want slims of that. It's crazy compared to what it used to be. Distributors used to just take whatever the fuck the supplier really wanted to send them. And now, and it's probably for the best that they don't at this point. I mean,
Well,
it really is.
there's only so much space, and listen, tastes are changing. I understand this, but we can still be nostalgia for some of these beers, and we can also look at a lot of these beers and say, man, are we really drinking better beer now because there are more breweries with less SKUs, or are we no longer drinking the incredible beers made by competent breweries? I mean, I'm looking at the North Coast lineup here on the website. I'm seeing Scrimshaw, Old Rasputin, Prankster, Brother
Forgot about them.
Thelonious,
Yeah.
Brother Thelonious, great beer. Red Seal, Blue Star, which was an excellent white ale. The stout that I mentioned earlier, the Old Stock. I mean, that's a great lineup. And I remember when I saw all those beers on the shelf at the same time, and really looking a gift horse in the mouth, thinking that, oh, all craft beer is this good. No, it really wasn't. And then North Coast was kind of an early adopter, what have you, in Florida. I remember when I was getting into beer, they were already on the shelves. The other brewery that I was thinking about was Smutty Nose. And they did not come down until I was well into my craft beer fandom. They were kind of a newer brand that came down here. And they're another one. They've got an incredible website that gives, it's an interesting way they have it laid out, where you can kind of scroll through all their classic beers. And as I was scrolling through them, I was like, oh my God, I think I was in love with Smutty Nose because all these beers were incredible for me. And these were the ones that I highlighted. The Old Dog Brown is something they still make, which I realize that a lot of browns, stouts, and ambers are on my list of favorite beers that are no longer in production. They're not as popular. They don't sell well, but I loved them. But that one's still in production. But they had an incredible Scotch ale, a Baltic porter that was masterful, They had an Imperial Stout. They had Big A IPA. I mean, I was just clicking through these one by one. I remember the first time I had the Smutty Nose Imperial Stout, and I was like, this is one of the best Imperial Stouts I've ever had. It was so good. And bringing that to a bottle share, I think I had that beer before it was available down here, and I got it in like Richmond and drove it down. And we were all raving about how great it was. And that's a brand that I feel like came into Florida big, was around for a short period of time, and then maybe they missed the window and went away. Now a lot of their beers are still available. I'm sure they're still very successful, but I feel that's a brand that we missed the boat on.
I'm going to be honest. I wasn't the biggest Smutty Nose fan. I found a lot of the stuff that they did to be kind of meh, but that there were some ones that you said that did specifically stand out to me. The Baltic Porter being one of them.
Great beer.
The Imperial Stout. I did not like Big A IPA. I wanted to. I tried it so many times, but I don't even remember why I didn't like it. But I do remember because of the name that I didn't like that beer. And also, their branding sucked at that time. Like I'm looking at their site now, and it is better now. But at that time, I was like, oh my God, these labels are terrible. But yeah, I mean, I know I think they've gone through some ownership changes over the last few years, and that probably has come with the change in a lot of the beers. Yeah, looking at the core lineup, it's old Brown Dog is basically the only thing that I remember from them now.
Me too.
And it's really crazy. This is like a night and day different brewery when comparing stuff that I remember to what they have now.
But I do. It does stand out to me how many great stouts, red ales, brown ales, Baltic porters in general that I loved that are no longer being produced, and it just goes to show you that the American public doesn't like those beers. I mean, even talking about something like Bell's Porter. Bell's Porter it was one of my favorite beers from Bell's. Bell's Best Brown, one of my favorite beers from Bell's. And they're not available here anymore. I believe at least one of those is still in production. Yeah, both of them I believe are still in production, but we don't see either one of them. We just get, Oberon and some of its derivatives, and we get Hop Slam. I can't remember the last time I saw Two Hearted. Yes, you're right, 100%. But I can't remember the last time I saw Kalamazoo Stout. I love Kalamazoo Stout. Double Cream Stout.
I would have argued, and I still could argue, that they were probably one of the best stout breweries in the world because they seem to just never miss with the stout, whether that be Kalamazoo, Expedition, Double Cream, what was the barrel aged one that everyone went crazy for at one point. I started a fucking shit show online because of a place that was serving that and was fucking picking who could buy it and who couldn't. But I'm not going to get into that. But that brewery is. I'm looking at this list now too. Oh yeah, this completely changing, sticking with Bell's, but changing the subject slightly. They just announced either today or the other day that they are making Oberon's Eclipse, which will be for out of Oberon season for people. It's essentially Oberon, but just packaged differently, made for the rest of the year. Even though maybe not a lot of people know this, Oberon is available year round in Florida and has been for many years. Where like up in Michigan, like they look forward to Oberon Day, the first day of spring, and the return of Oberon. And it's like, yeah, it's been here all year when you come down to Florida.
I am from Michigan. I love Bell's, and I echo all your sentiments about the stouts. Joel was nice enough to bring over a bottle of Expedition, and an aged bottle at that. And I either we drank it together or he left it for me, and I drank it later on. And I was like, oh, one of the greatest imperial stouts of all time, bar none. Forget your adjuncts, put them away. You don't need them. This beer is better than all of them. So I love Bell's. I don't like Oberon. I've never liked Oberon. I've never enjoyed that beer. So that's a hot take for the fact of how much I love that brewery. But I mean, Java Stout was great. I mean, I love the cherry stout. I love the bourbon
Oh
barrel
yeah,
aged
now
cherry
I'm just
stout.
seeing the cherry stout on here too. Yeah.
You know, there's so many amazing beers, and we either get a fraction of what they make, and some of those beers are just no longer available. And listen, we understand there's attrition and marketability and things of that nature, but I was just shocked at how many beers either are not in this market or are completely gone that, I had such a strong tie to. One of the breweries that I wanted to look
Black Note.
at,
That's the Imperial.
Black
That's
Note,
the yeah.
yes.
They have a retired beer section. Like all of these breweries have retired beer sections too on their sites.
Well, and so because so many of those beers were so important to people, and
Yeah.
having a chance to go back and look at them is great. One brewery that had one of the longest retired beer sections, and this makes perfect sense, on Beer Advocate was Dogfish Head, right? How
Yeah.
many experimental beers? How many crazy one-offs did they do? They were the culinary brewery before that was a thing that you said. And I was looking through their list of retired beers, once again on Beer Advocate. I don't know how accurate it was, but the two that stood out to me, and I'm sure there's other ones, were Palo Santo and Black and Blue. Black and Blue, God, did I love that beer. I would give anything for a bottle of Black and Blue right now, just to experience that beer again. That's a beer I loved with a passion undying.
I remember. I think you had me have Black and Blue for the first time at Coffee District. We were hanging out, and you were like, "You know what? I'm going to buy a bottle of this. We'll split this." And I remember loving that. But Palo Santo, there's no beer like that. I've never had a beer like possibly the closest thing, just in completely wood aged weirdness, is White Oak or Humidor. Probably more so Humidor IPA or Humidor, or what are they calling it? Cedar aged or Cedar Oak Highlight, I think is what Phil's probably like, just say the brand right.
He's cringing right now, yeah.
But I've never had a wood aged beer like that before, and it was just incredible. I remember when I was very early into the beer and first had that. I had some friends come. This was before I even knew you, Kevin. I had some friends come over for dinner, and I made different courses and paired them with beers, and I had Palo Santo. I don't even remember what I paired it with, but people were like, "This is weird." And I'm like, yeah, it's weird, but it's so cool. And there are people that were like, yeah, sure. But I haven't even gone to Dogfish Head's site, but man, there's so much from that. Like, is Midas Touch even in?
I was just gonna say Midas Touch. No,
I love that beer too.
I went to their website and I did not see on their website a good list of retired beers. But going through all the beers I love from Dogfish Head, I did not see many of them in the current production. And listen, I'm a big fan of 60 Minute. I'm a big fan of 90 Minute. 90 Minute's a great beer.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great brewery. They've made incredible beers throughout ages. They've laid the groundwork for so many of us. But we all have our place where we found craft beer or a community of craft beer. And for me and you, I think both, it was Coffee District. And going there and looking at all those bottles on the shelf and seeing, I feel like 15 Dogfish Head beers lined up side by side and going, oh yeah, I'll have a Palo Santo and I'll have a Midas Touch and I'll have a this. And it was amazing to drink through all those and try those for the first time and share those with friends. And yeah, a lot of it's nostalgia. A lot of it's time and place of kind of growing up in the beer industry. And maybe it would be different if I found those beers now. Would I like them as much? I don't know. But especially with a brand like Dogfish Head, that's another brand that owned Florida.
Yeah.
Owned Florida. Every tap takeover, every beer
Coffee
dinner.
District was Dogfish Head, South Florida, before Dogfish Head, Miami was a thing.
I mean, it was a franchise. They had it everywhere, and now you just it's there, yeah, and they're still probably doing numbers like crazy, but they've been kind of relegated to being in the back end, and not being as visible, and other brands, and I'm just a couple of the things that are on this list. I'm just going to throw out there, and we can talk about them. Or we can pass over them. Lagunitas, Brooklyn. Two other brands. They've got beers down here, but not like they used to. I was shocked how many Lagunitas beers that I had nostalgia for.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that specifically jump out at me were Hop Stupid, Brown Sugar, Sucks, um, and those beers. I couldn't wait for Brown Sugar and for Hop Stupid to come out. Hop Stupid, I think, eventually became year round. But man, those beers were just so fucking good. And then when Sucks came out in place of Brown Sugar one year, because they couldn't make Brown Sugar, so they made Lagunitas Sucks instead. I was like, this beer might, like, completely different type of beer. I'm like, this beer might be even better in my opinion, and I might want this more than Brown Sugar. Like, Lagunitas is still such a good brewery. Like, when we were in California a few months ago, I had a number of IPAs on draft at restaurants and places. Such a good fucking beer still. When we came back, I saw an IPA variety pack at Whole Foods one day, and I was like, you know what? Let's get it. I hadn't had a little something in a while. That was in there. There was a tropical IPA. There was a hazy IPA in there. It was all great. And like that brewery, there's actually a beer that they make that I did drink every year that it came out, still to recently. That was the Willetized Imperial Stout, or Coffee Imperial Stout. So it was Coffee Imperial Stout aged in Willet bourbon barrels. My wife and I always got a bottle of it for having on Christmas, and their distributor down here did not bring it in this past Christmas, so we did not get to have it. I was looking, I'm looking, and then I reached out to a friend of ours who works at a big retailer. I don't want to put him on the spot, so I'm not going to say his name, but he's like, yeah, they're not bringing it in this year. And I was like, fuck, like, it's like a Christmas tradition for us to have this beer. But man, Lagunitas put out some fucking bangers. Yeah.
100%. And then, I just mentioned Brooklyn, and the first two verticals that I ever saw were Thomas Hardy's, which no idea where that is now. I actually went through my pantry and we did some reorganizing in the house. I found 3 bottles of 2007 Thomas Hardy's and 3 bottles of 2008. Long stories about vintage Thomas Hardy's that I probably put on this podcast before, but Thomas Hardy and Brooklyn Monster. Those are the first 2 beer verticals that I saw in a tasting, or someone said, "Oh, I've got these verticals," and then I saw them for Dark Lord, and then Hunapoo, and then tons of other beers over
I
time.
always remember Bigfoot being a part of like those vertical discussions.
Bigfoot, that's a great freaking beer. I mean, I had Sierra Nevada Kellerweiss, by the way, on my list of beers that we can no longer get, which I absolutely loved and was a perfect beer by every standard of beer. But Brooklyn Monster, can we imagine that beer would be sought after trading these days? I don't know, but it was, and people lost their mind over it and would go out of their way to put these verticals together. And Soriachi Ace was also on there as far as my list. Brooklyn putting out great stuff for a very, very long time.
Oh yeah. The black chocolate stout was insane.
We have gotten that. We have gotten that down here.
Okay,
in the
they
last
still
year.
do. They still do
Yes.
make that. Okay.
Yeah, I reviewed it on Old Favorite Friday about a year ago.
Okay. That's good to know.
Thankfully,
I remember traveling a little bit, an hour, north. Like once you leave Palm Beach County north of here, for a while was like a completely different area of distribution, and there was beers available up there that weren't available down here because of different distributors and so on. And I used to go up to the Total Wine in Jensen Beach and to Vine and Barley in Port St. Lucie to have beers that I couldn't get even just in like an hour away. And I remember going up to Vine and Barley in Port St. Lucie and getting Dark Matter from Brooklyn, like going up specifically for that beer. It was
and
a
getting
barrel
growlers.
aged, yeah, I think it was a barrel aged brown ale, and bringing it back in a growler to share with like the group that we got together at Coffee District for our bottle share Mondays, and like that there were so many of those weird little one-off draft things that they got from Brooklyn up there, and I remember traveling multiple times just to go have them. The cookie jar porter,
Porter, yes, because that was like, I mean, I thought it was a similar time that you had the oatmeal raisin cookie from Cigar City.
oh, and there was beef on that.
Yeah,
Didn't you know about that?
I mean, I vaguely remember it, but it's been a long time.
Long story short, because I believe all the beef has been squashed by this time, but Garrett Oliver said that Cigar City stole the idea and wasn't as good, and Wayne got very upset by it and showed like ratings proof of like upload, like when they became available on Rate Beer. And eventually they, from my understanding, they worked it all out and all of that. But like there was a little bit of a beef for a bit locally.
Can you imagine a time, it's so quaint, in the brewing industry where someone could lay claim to making an oatmeal raisin cookie beer as the first people to do that? Like now we have 400 breweries doing every single pie, dessert, whatever it is.
We have 400 breweries doing Mosaic Citra IPAs.
But I mean, like, it's so funny that like, oh, we were the first people to. I remember when I was at Funky, and they did the Voodoo Donut beer from Rogue.
Yeah,
and people said, "Oh, they're aping on Maple Bacon Coffee Porter." Or I mean, like what? Like they don't know what's going on here. Like we are breweries having independent ideas. And we're not that unique. We're just thinking about all the things that people like, and we're making beers that represent them in a culinary way.
you know, I remember that whole thing. That beer wasn't very good.
No, it was not.
But I remember being a little upset about it, and just thinking about how naive I was at that point in time, and not being very critical, thoughtful of coincidence, and just that's not even a coincidence. It's just their flavors. They worked with a donut company who had a flavor called maple bacon donut, and it's just like it was so silly for me to get upset about something like that, and for other people to get upset about something like that.
But we're all very protective of the beers that we love, and the
Rogue
breweries.
is one of those breweries down here. We had so much of their stuff.
Everything. Hazelnut Brown, the Christmas ale that they put out every year. I mean, they were another
Shakespeare
one of those.
Stout was really good. Mocha Porter was really
Oh,
good.
Mocha Porter was very good. Yeah, that's another brewery that they're just, other than Dead Guy, there's
I
really nothing
loved
down here.
Captain Sig's red ale. It was an imperial red ale, so like a very. They did it with the Deadliest Catch. It was
Oh,
a crossover thing, that TV show, but it was like a really hoppy imperial red ale. It was so good. It was like that period where imperial red ales were a thing. Those really over hopped beers. Like I'm trying to remember. Um, what's their faces? Port had like a really really good one, and I can't remember for the life of me what it was called.
I mean,
But a lot of those West Coast guys had a hoppy imperial red.
we could talk about Green Flash. We could talk about Hophead Red.
Yeah.
We can talk about. I mean, the thing is that we're lucky in the beer industry. We've had so many great beers, and I remember a time when none of them were filtering down to Florida, and then they all came in. And then we're like kids in a candy store, and we can't drink them all. We can't support them all. And Mike, you and I certainly could not support them all. The industry down here could not, because no one cared, and they couldn't actually make money off of it, so they all went away. Because our market did not embrace craft beer like other markets had in the past. But yeah, it's amazing how many great beers came in, had success, limited success, incredible success, whatever it was, but they're no longer available today for
Yeah.
us, for other people, and it does not limit how good they were, and how much impact they had on us. And I'll mourn those beers for a very long time. I will be nostalgic for a lot of the beers we talked about forever.
It's kind of funny because you and I used to do a wrestling podcast where
We did.
we hated fucking nostalgia. We fucking bashed nostalgia into the fucking ground because it was all WWE did. Is just, here's an old person. Be happy. They're back, right? And we hated it. It was just pandering and it was bullshit. And now here we are. We're being nostalgic about beers. And the I know what happened. Like it's something new and shiny came along and took my attention, and for the most part it was local. It was, we finally started to have a local brewing scene to get involved in, and these bigger national brands didn't really shine to me anymore. And that sucks. And I would try to pick up stuff that I really liked from bigger national brands, smaller national brands that were here when I could. And I've said this many, many times before. I am still to this day very active in trying new beers, trying to go back to old beers, but it's hard. It's really difficult. I know, like, Total Wine is our big box retailer for getting stuff down here. They've cut back on the amount of beer that they have considerably. I was just in
Huge.
the Palm Beach Gardens location, and they've cut a lot out of it. But there's still a whole lot of stuff, and it's still intimidating to someone like me. Um, I recently got a variety pack of 6 Point stuff. I was going to the store. I needed something, and had some people coming over. And I was like, oh, cool. It was a 15 pack for $17, and it was all in code. So I was like, let me do this, and it had Crisp, it had Bengali, which were two of their like old classics. It had resin in it too.
Of course.
But then they had like Stupor, which is a hazy IPA, and the Piff, double hazy IPA. All of them were great. I've always enjoyed Crisp and resin. But I mean, the other ones, so good. And like, this is a brewery like 6 Point. I haven't bought a beer from them in probably a number of years. But I know you've done resin recently on Old Favorite Friday, and that was stuck in my mind when I saw that too. I was like, I haven't had a resin in a while. I want to try to be better with this, but I can only do so much.
Well, it's not your job to support the entire industry, Mike. So please take that burden off your shoulder. But I will I will tell you this. When I go down and I go to the Total Wine in Boca, and once again, this is the big box beer store. I know they're not the end all be all. There's tons of other places doing different things. But right now, and if you can imagine, the shelves that are in front of you that are what, 6 foot wide or what have you, there are now like 4 or 5 that contain Florida beers. Many of the breweries that you and I know the people that work there. Some of them we don't. When I look at those shelves, I go, would they be better off if they had Avery and Great Divide on them? Yeah. Those beers are a lot better than the vast majority of the beers that are on that shelf. And would they be better if they had a bigger variety of North Coast on there? Yeah, they'd be a lot better off. There's a lot better beers from North Coast than there are in some of the breweries that are on the local Florida shelves. And some of the national brands that we're not going to talk about, the brands we don't like, but that we're looking at going, why is that on the shelf there when there are 1,000 other brands that make better beer and have consistently for 20 years now? Now, this is our preference. And Mike, you and I, our flavors, our tastes, we tend to align more often than we don't. But just because you have more variety, just because you have a new shiny thing all the time, does not mean that the stuff that has been around for 15 years isn't, I mean, light years better than what we have available to us now.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're on a collision course to what I am going to dub the big dumb reckoning in beer. And where a bunch of breweries close, a bunch of breweries scale down, and we just get back into a more concise, hyper local, and real regional sized breweries. Like there was a group text going on with a few people that I know last week, and talking about the shelf space. And there are breweries who are down here right now who I do really like, but they have no fucking business being down here because they don't have a sales rep. They're not moving any product. Like, I don't see them on draft, but I see their cans and their bottles in Total Wines, and a lot of the stuff is getting near date codes if they have a Best Buy, or just seem really old by their born on dates. And it's like, even some of the locals, it's like, who the fuck are you? Like, what is this? Like, we don't need all of this here. I don't like to see people lose jobs. I don't like to see people lose careers and businesses and stuff like that. But this is all coming down to the fact that we have pushed away good quality beer and companies out of this state. And your state, if you're in Ohio, it's probably happened there too. For stuff that has been deemed better just because it's local, just because it's made closer, but might not actually be better. So yeah, I feel like we are in for a big dumb reckoning where it's not saying that Avery's coming back to this state. They probably aren't, and they probably shouldn't. It's not to say that I wouldn't love to have some Maharaja, but it's essentially, if you're not going to put a sales rep here who really is trying to sell your beer, you have no business going to that place. But man, I do miss those beers. I do, but if anything, it makes me want to travel more, to go to places. Going back to the callback to the last episode, go back to Colorado and visit some of these places. One of our cellar guys, Jason, he's a listener of the show. He's moving to Colorado in like a month, and I look forward to being able to go there and visit him and drink some beers from places out there that I really love, and also go see my friend Matty from New Belgium. Which thank you for the beers, Matt. We really enjoyed them. I shared some with the guys at the brewery, gave Kevin some. We shared a bottle together. Much appreciated.
I just want to say,
yeah.
I would say in a just world, Mike, we'd be having Avery Maharaja, Smutty Nose, the Old Dog Brown, and also some Great Lakes Dortmunder in our fridges right now, instead of the billion other beers that are available on the shelves that are just objectively worse. Just because those beers on the shelf next in your neighborhood doesn't mean they're the best. You might like them. And yes, I love the idea of giving the local breweries the opportunity. But this idea that the cream rises to the top, that just because you have quality, you will succeed, that is not true. It is objectively not true. And what we're talking about right now,
And Macho Man was wrong all these years.
he was, Mike, going back to the wrestling thing. But Mike, you and I often talk about our breweries and how much passion we have for them, and we think we have a lot of quality, but we're not the biggest breweries ever. We're talking about national brands that had weight and could throw that around in a market, but could not, even with the quality they had, keep the market share. So we know objectively that just because you have great quality, just because you're making some of the best beers in the world, does not mean that you're going to be successful. And it's a sad reckoning, and maybe that's what all of this comes back to. But I want to put some rose-colored glasses on it and just appreciate how good those beers are. And hopefully some of the people listening to this love those beers as much as we do. Hopefully some of the people listening to this make those beers and go, oh, those guys down in Florida appreciated this.
Yeah. All right. Any other points of nostalgia you want to talk about?
I'll go through and find another 20 breweries and we'll do part 2 of this. No, I'm good right now.
Okay. All right. Let's head into last calls, the point in the show where we give each other an unspecific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that we want to talk about. It can be beer related, not beer related. But the only thing is that it is uninterrupted, unobjected, and unopposed. Kev, what do you want to do?
So many of you will know from my rants on the worthwhileness of social media will know that I am not a social media guy. I don't have an actual personal social media account. I make jokes about that on a regular basis. But there is one social media account that I love to follow, and it's Dr. IDZ. So for those of you who don't know, I am a scientific medicine person. I am a person that likes to research and understand what's actually going on in the world. And it's very passionate for me to actually follow people that are giving you good advice that is based on research and knowledge, not just some kind of Instagram influencer that can say things and get all the likes in the world because they say the thing that is the most popular thing at the time. Dr. IDZ, every time he does a video, it is always backed up by research about what the thing is actually talking about, listing the actual studies that you can actually reference to go back and find out more information on it. And for those of you that don't know, this is a lot of stuff about like lifestyle, health, a lot of things about like diet and exercise and things of that nature. And this is a person who actually has a master's degree in nutritional research and is actually a practicing doctor. And we have, it feels like millions, but it's not. But we have hundreds of people that are out there giving health advice just because they have 1.5 million followers. And they're saying the things that people want to hear. They're demonizing chemicals that you can't pronounce, so therefore you shouldn't be putting them in your body, even though that's the chemical composition of water or what have you. Um, Please follow the advice of professionals that are willing to cite their research and talk to you honestly about what's actually happening in the world. This actually came to a head recently for me, and I was having a conversation with someone at a party, and they were talking about how seed oils were inflammatory and terrible for you and giving you cancer and the worst things in the world for you, which would include grapeseed oil, canola oil, tons of others. And I was watching this video from Dr. IDZ, who broke down how none of the research actually says any of that. It's nonsense. It's fear mongering. It's the kind of thing that people do because they can get likes off of it. So I can't endorse everything that the person says. I think you have to do, in some ways, your own research. You have to ask questions of everything that you see. It's being a good critical thinker. But if you're looking for health advice, try to find people that actually have, I don't know, a degree or two. I don't know, cite some kind of evidence in what they're actually saying.
All right. Everyone knows I am one of the biggest critics of Florida. But over the years, I have learned to try to find good points within where I live, to which I can be proud of. And living in West Palm Beach, I feel like has really helped me with that. Both times I have lived here in West Palm, before I moved to Philly and after I moved back from Philly. If there's one place in South Florida that I would be forced to have to live for the rest of my life, it probably would be West Palm Beach. And part of that reason is that I feel like there's some really good food in this city that I feel like it's underappreciated. And one of those things being barbecue. As of right now, West Palm Beach has some really, really good barbecue joints right within the city limits, and a few of them are within a mile and a half of one another. So with that, I just want to give some shout outs to places that I really think make excellent barbecue. And if you're ever in West Palm Beach, you should go and chow down with them. Shout outs to Tropical Smokehouse, Troy's Barbecue, and Austin Republic, a new place that just opened up probably a few months ago. And my wife and I just finally went for the first time by the time this comes out a couple of weeks ago. And I am so disappointed in myself that it took me so long to go there. Everything that I had was fantastic. I had ribs, I had brisket tacos, I had corn ribs, which are essentially just parts of the corn, but with the whole street corn toppings done on them. And they had brisket mac and cheese bites that were insanely good. It's a really no frills place. They have shipping containers that have been turned into their kitchen with picnic tables underneath a couple big banyan trees for some shade. They're only open for dinner. And I thought they were fantastic, and they're a welcome addition to the barbecue scene in our town. And I just want to say, if you come to West Palm, eat some Q. I highly doubt that you'll be disappointed. Kev, you want to plug anything?
September 23rd, 2023. I believe this podcast will be out by that time. Yep. And I want anyone who is interested to come down to Barrel of Monks Brewing to try our Wizard in Pink, which is a reimagined version of Witty in Pink. It's a raspberry version of our white ale. which the proceeds go to making strides against breast cancer, something we've been doing for many years. And also the new version of Endless Enigma, which is a hazy IPA. Really the best batch that Ralph has ever made. I'm so happy with this beer. He did such a great job with it. It's blowing my mind. And our Marzen. So we have 3 beers coming out that day, and it's supporting a good cause. So I'd love to see people down there for that day. But also just coming up to the month of October, if you see Wizard in Pink and you are in Florida, you are supporting Making Strides Against Breast Cancer by buying that beer. So it's something we've been doing for a long time. My partners are radiologists by trade, and it's something that's passionate for us, and we want to make sure that we support.
Always love that you guys have worked with a local charity on those and not the one who sues people over using a pink ribbon in their promotions. Looking forward to trying all of those beers. We, by the time of recording this, our Fest beer is back out at Copper Point. Das Fest beer released today, and it's tasting so good. It's available on draft and in cans at our tap room in Boynton Beach. Limited draft went out. I think we sent about like 20 slims out to market, so you might see it here and there in the South Florida market, but cans are only available at our tap room. We're doing Oktoberfest on the 29th and 30th at our tap room. We got awesome new mugs in for this. We do a keep the mug thing every year for this. You buy the mug in your first pour, and you get to take the mug home with you. We have food both days from Silver Spork doing German themed food, and also on Saturday, our friends from the Butcher and the Bar in Boynton Beach, an awesome restaurant in downtown Boynton, will be on site with house-made pretzels and brats that they're going to be grilling up there. We're going to have Stein hoisting contest on Saturday, the 30th. I'll be the judge of that. I believe Joel's going to try to come and win it once again. He was the first ever winner of the contest. He did not win last year, but he wants to try to win it again. So he's going to be back out there to try to do that, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, we got Oktoberfest, Fest beers, all of that fun stuff going on at Copper Point in Boynton Beach.
Cool.
Other than that, we'll be back in a couple weeks with a brand new episode. And I don't know, my mind just went away there for a second. I passed away and then came back. I saw the light and was like, "Oh, let's go there." And I'm like, no, I got to finish this podcast. Then I'll go away.
Dedication. Dedication. That's what I like about you, Mike. I've always respected it.
I even turned down going to the good place. I saw Derek. He had one of those giant glasses filled with just ping pong balls, and I was like, no, not doing that. If you want to support the show, go to our website, unitedwedrink.com, and check out the Brands We Love page. We got some awesome stuff on there. If you use those links and you purchase something from them, it goes towards helping the show. We have Trade Coffee, Liquid Death, water. Their teas are awesome. Made in Cookware. I'm actually going to probably be buying something from Made in again soon. Need a smaller nonstick pan. Something you need to know about. We also have our web store, unitedwedrink.com/store, for shirts, buttons, stickers, totes, and all of that fun stuff.
Be like my dad. Buy like 10 shirts. Do
yes,
that.
Be Jim Abbott. That's our next shirt. Be Jim Abbott. He'll buy those for the next family reunion, and then he'll comment about it on our website. But also one quick thing to all the people who reached out to me after last episode with the condolences. Thank you so much. It really means a lot. There's actually a number of people who I didn't even know who listened to the show who reached out and had nice words for me. So thank you for that. Other than that, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Talk and drink while we talk and talk about drinking. We'll see you then. Cheers.
Cheers.